Good afternoon, everybody. When I was looking at this place here in the front, it reminded me a bit of my grandmother's attic. We have this unused lectern standing here in the corner, then we have some unused Spanish wall, and then we have a totally unused planet. Center stage, not on the margins. Just to remind us what we are talking about, our common house. And if we cannot take care of this blue marble and marble, then I think we lost our marbles. Somehow in the form you remember it, North Pole up and so on. And now it's moving and falling. Anyway, on Friday, Frederick Achard gave a presentation in the European Pavilion, and he summarized a few recent data from a reanalysis of global forest cover and global forest loss, saying that basically over the last 36 years, 22% of the global forest cover was lost to deforestation, and 7% of global forest cover was lost to degradation. That's about the size of, what is it? The land cover of India is the area we lost to deforestation. And the land cover of, I'm not talking forest, I'm just saying land cover. So land cover, so you have a comparison. The land cover of Colombia was lost to degradation. So it doesn't maybe look like much because the planet is much bigger than these places, but these are, in relation to the land surface, these are quite big areas, as you can see. So that's overall the planet. So it doesn't show up so much in some places, but if it was, for example, all concentrated in Amazonia, it would be 80% of Brazilian Amazonia, for example. So it's actually quite some area. And with this, I would like to introduce our next session, which is about REDD+, reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation. And I'd like to welcome you to this and also our online audience to this session. And it's been a long day, and I know you're sitting in this quite stuffy room and looking at people speaking on a podium. So maybe I turn it around to start the session with, which we call 10 years of REDD+, what have we learned? And you'll hear in a minute about what we think we have learned, but maybe I just turn the question around to you. What do you think you have learned? What is your impression of REDD+ over the last 10 years? Just shout something that summarizes your understanding of REDD+. Anybody, please help me here. Different applications in different countries, yeah, okay. What was that?
Not as easy as we thought.
Not as easy as we thought, okay. Red is dead, somebody? No? Lame duck? Okay, yeah. Some more pressing impressions? Yes, in the back, please.
Not yet financially viable.
Not yet?
Financially meaningful, I should say.
Financially meaningful?
Not yet.
Okay.
I don't believe that if you use market-based mechanism, it will work because the cost for monitoring and MRV in general too high for the benefit you gain from carbon credit.
I'm not quite sure I got the message acoustically, but...
Sorry. I don't believe that.
Okay, the monitoring cost is too high.
You use REDD+, but apply the market-based mechanism, it will work. Okay. Because the cost for MRV higher than what you gain from selling carbon credit.
Okay, good, thank you. Okay, good. So we have some opinions in the room, and I hope you'll be ready now to listen to what our panel has to say. So I'd like to, I think we do it one by one first, so nobody has to sit on the podium for too long. And we start with Arad Angelsen, who is a professor for economics and business in the Norwegian School of Life Science, which is actually not a school but a university. I think. Harold, right? And so he is the lead editor of a book that C4 just launched this week, Transforming REDD, as we called it, and he will give you a summary. And then we'll have another colleague coming in, Stipniati Atmaja, who works from the C4 office in Ethiopia. She will give you a summing up of the chapter on REDD plus finance in that book. And then we have a representative of Amman, the Deputy Secretary, Mina Setra. I hope she's in the room somewhere. And she will then, oh yeah, okay, thanks. Great to see you. Just let's listen to Harold, what he has to say about transforming REDD, lessons and new directions.
So maybe the title for the next presentation will be Making the Lame Duck Walk. Okay, I guess I should stand up here so you all see me better. Some of you may have heard the presentation previously, but the voice is new for today, so at least there's something new. This is a... Okay. There we go. This is a series of books that C4 has made, try to summarize the experience of REDD so far. From 2008 in Poznan, and you can see in various languages it has been trying to summarize more than 10 years of global comparative research on REDD, the GCS project of C4, by C4 and a number of partners. An impressive figure is almost 500 publication, journal articles, book chapters, and so on that has come out of this project. I think it's fair to say that it is the largest study on REDD that has been undertaken. So this book summarizes some parts, of course not all of it. Which direction should I point? Felt like a lame duck for a moment. The approach that we take is this, a critical but constructive. Critical because climate change is serious. We have to make sure that what we do work. We don't do things to satisfy ourselves and to feel good, but because we are concerned and need to reduce emissions from forests. And in doing this, I think it's important that it's stressed in a chapter led by Christoph here, second chapter of the book, to distinguish between REDD as the objective versus REDD the framework. REDD the objective of reducing emissions that we need, that it's urgently needed, it's a key part to reach 2 degrees, not to speak about 1.5, but at the same time the implementation, REDD in the meaning of the umbrella term for actions at all levels aimed at forest-based mitigation. Some limited it further to only have this result-based payment. Some, if you talk at negotiators here, they said REDD, it's what's within the UNFCCC framework. However we define it, stay firm on the first point and have a critical debate on the second. REDD has transformed a lot, partly responding to the Paris Agreement, a new way of thinking about climate deals from a top-down of Kyoto to a bottom-up, where NDCs take center stage in the Paris Agreement. A changing political climate with political deniers in high offices that makes it hard, and the gap between, say, the 1.5 degree report and what seems to be the political will in key countries is kind of widening. But we also have learned a few lessons, and we had high hopes and need to manage expectations. The book has 4 main parts, and mainly they relate a bit to the phases of REDD in the way that we started out, that we started out with the building blocks, the capacity building, the finance, the phase 1 stuff that is here. Second is the politics of REDD. NDCs in national climate policies, we heard some here already from Climate Focus, multi-level governance, land and tenure questions, assessing the impacts, did it work? And then a few evolving initiatives on jurisdictional approaches, private sector, climate smart agriculture and forest restoration. Finance and building blocks, I skip this because Nia is going to talk about it, but something has happened. The second is the positive intermediate outcomes, and also both during GLF here and in Bonn last week, and also at COP, we have heard about countries have taken steps, putting REDD in the NDCs, national REDD strategies. One impressive figure that I would like to highlight is jurisdictional approaches. There is a chapter summarizing the 39 jurisdictions that have almost all of them, or not almost all of those have committed to reducing deforestation, and they do cover 28% of the tropical forest. That's significant. A lot of more local REDD projects with 43 million hectares. So these are outcomes that have laid the foundation for kind of the phase 3, that is to achieve impacts. The impacts, what is reported in 3 chapters in the book at the national REDD policies, overall they are modest, they are smaller than we thought, much smaller than predicted, so it is kind of counteractive some of the strong deforestation forces, but much less than we hoped. Local REDD initiatives, modest again, but overall, if you summarize it, it's more positive than insignificant or negative outcomes. Well-being impacts, particularly when it's linked with the incentives and payments to the households or to communities, they are more likely to achieve kind of a win-win situation. I worked a bit on development aid, and it's a lot of similarities, what's called the micro-macro paradox in development aid. That you see some positive impacts in localized projects, but when you look at aggregate figures, it's hard to see them, and for a number of reasons that are mentioned here. How can REDD become more effective? And we have some thoughts about it in the concluding chapter. International finance nudges countries to do that, but the domestic incentives designed. I think this redesigning economic incentives for a triple win, conserving forest, increase economic efficiency, and maybe also helps to improve budget balances. Shifting the trillions is a term used. We heard about the 40 billion in subsidies to the top 4 deforestation commodities. Examples, the drastic reduction that happened in Brazil and hopefully will be maintained after 2004. India's ecological fiscal transfer, where the allocation from the federal level to the states is based on forest cover, and it's in the order of 7 to 12 billion annually. Ethiopia's restoration plan is a third example of this kind of large scale. So we can avoid this projectification and make REDD support these reforms that I think is challenging. I think one of the lessons, we have seen the limits of project level reforms, and REDD initially was intended to be much more at national level than we have seen so far. Second conclusion, a positive, exciting narrative on forests. Blakey has written a book, political scientist, about what he called the iron law of climate policy. The iron law is this: if there is a conflict between economic development and climate loses. Simple as that. Look to France. Make forests part of a green or sustainable economic development strategy or plan. And this positive narrative that the alternatives we have is not business as usual, it is a future, a hot planet, 3, 4, 5 degrees, or something that we embark on this sustainable development path. And forests can play. 2 figures that can, I think, be helpful in building this. We had this PEN project, where we found that about a quarter, or at least 22%, of the income was from forest, in the household income in 8,000 households in 24 countries. Forest as biopumps, and these are aerial rivers transporting moisture from the ocean to the interior of countries. 2 elements that I think in building this narrative. The third, be brave and assess impacts. There are surprisingly few studies. Amy Duchel in the chapter has summarized how many they are, and you can see the figures here. Very few, and particularly on carbon. There's more on non-carbon benefits. And REDD in itself is about reducing emissions, and that is an impact assessment. It's kind of embedded in the term itself, and yet not much has been done. Impact assessment is not storytelling by donors, proponents, but it's a rigorous approach that you need to plan from the very beginning. And it is surprising, one of the surprising, why have it done so little? And I put up 3 hypotheses why it hasn't been done more. Okay? Why haven't we done it? I think one is this: a lot of proponents and donors and others, they don't see the benefits. They think if it works, you can see it. No, you cannot, because you don't know the counterfactual, what would happen without it. So it's neat. You have a strong faith in your own approach. And it's also, if you just go there and look, there is a strong confirmation bias, and you want to see success. The second hypothesis, high cost and complexity of this. So it's not a simple thing to do. It's difficult even in theory, not to talk about practice. So, and some say if you want to have this randomization of treatments that you do in medical trials, it's considered unethical. And finally, the high risks involved. If you do an impact assessment, the conclusion may be negative. You have no control of the verdict, and a negative outcome of the assessment may jeopardize your reputation or future funding. So I was surprised, why haven't we done more? And these are 3 hypotheses. Of course, I cannot test them rigorously. 10 years of REDD, last slide. What have we learned? Not as much as hoped, partly because of what we explained. Yeah, we have made good progress on the intermediate outcomes, and we should be happy. They are important, and they lay the foundation to build on for having real impact. Hopefully, it's not just words, and we'll stop there, but it is to take the next step to actually see emission reductions. I think also we have reached a point that addressing the underlying drivers and the fundamental economic incentives is the next. And that's ultimately a political question, political in the way that there are conflicting interests and political solutions that say that, okay, the palm oil industry, the big beef producers, your interests is secondary to the climate objectives. So some of these political questions that we wanted to tackle to have a transformation change, the time has come to address that, and that's the more harder than what we have done so far, but needed to really see and a change in the actual deforestation and degradation levels. So, thanks.
Thanks, Harold. Okay, I'm going to go directly to the next speaker, Nia Stipniati. Please, you can, please, okay.
Yes, I will feel alone, so please sit. Okay, should I stand up here in front of the globe? Okay, I have a long skirt here. Okay, hi everyone. My name is Nia. I have a rather long name. I'm based in C4 in Ethiopia, and I'm one of the co-authors of one of the chapters in the book. I'm leading author, yes. And it's about climate finance. Now, I've heard before some people were mentioning it's not paying off, it's expensive to start. So a lot of the lack of, progress may lie in the financing part. So we know that REDD has a lot of upfront costs. Even the MRV cost alone is quite large. And not only that, is also about capacity building, not only building the tools, but also the people necessary to use these tools. And also the policies. And after that, you actually have to implement activities and sustain them for quite a long time. And so finance is absolutely necessary. What I wanted to highlight is that the data on climate finance that we are using right now are based on either the carbon market data or data reported by donors or by receivers of REDD money. And so in that sense that there's a lot of gaps in there. So for example, a lot of countries, a lot of developing countries who are receivers, they're actually putting a lot of things inside. They're not just asking for money. They are also putting their own budgets into on the table. They're putting a lot of in-kind support, and not only at the national level, but also subnational governments, civil society organizations, villagers, community members. But these we do not have data for. And so what we find here is that the negotiation table is not equal. The data is from one side. You have people putting in money on the other side, but we don't know how much. There are some studies that try to tease out how much developing countries are putting into climate finance and REDD finance. But these studies are showing that it's very tricky to get these data because they're all structured in very different, completely different ways across countries. But however, I feel like if REDD is supposed to continue and it's a global effort, then all the players need to show their contributions equally. And having this lack of data is quite unfortunate. So what I'd like to also talk about is what data we have. So in this study, we analyzed data from the OECD crediting report system. And this is data reported by countries to the OECD about transfers they made related to overseas development aid or loans, and things like that. And what we found is that there are very few countries that are financially supporting REDD, according to this data set. And this data set, as I said, is reported by one side. So the top four, if you are talking about REDD in total, which means REDD that are activities explicitly labeled as REDD, and activities that are not explicitly REDD but contribute to the objectives. Number one is Germany. Number two is Norway. Number three is the United States. Number four is Japan. And these four countries, let me see. These four countries, I think, they contribute to, let me check my notes. Oh my God. I have a lot of numbers. Okay. Okay, so Germany and Norway alone, they contribute more than 70% of activities, 70% of climate of finance for activities that are labeled as REDD. And so as you can see, the whole situation of these like explicit REDD activities are pretty much based on two big donors. And this makes the whole financing situation quite vulnerable to what happens to the select few countries. But if you expand a bit and you talk about activities that are not explicitly labeled as REDD, for instance, things that support forest conservation, for instance, it's labeled as agriculture, but actually it has agroforestry components and such as that, then you have a broader base of donors. Additionally, REDD funding is entirely, like the ones that are explicitly named REDD, entirely grants. And this is because you have a lot of upfront costs to be labeled as REDD. So you cannot expect countries to borrow. However, if you expand it a little more to include activities that are, I say, sharing the REDD objectives, then you have something like 36% or so of the money that's loans. So these are activities that countries felt, okay, yeah, I can borrow. This is an investment for my country. So that's the situation of the activities that are labeled as REDD. And I'd like also to talk about this, the contribution of communities and recipient countries. I think the whole view we have is like there's this donor giving money, and then there's a recipient receiving money, and then it's a whole project kind of relationship. When in fact, maybe it's not. A lot of countries, for example, well, I'll give you one example is Indonesia, because I'm Indonesian, but they recently embarked in a climate finance tagging system, where the whole idea is to figure out how much money the Indonesian government puts into climate mitigation and adaptation activities, because it's integrated in a national strategy on how to address climate change. And where is this? No. Okay. 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 So they found around 250 million US dollars on climate change mitigation activities, which is 30 times the amount that donors have committed to the same kind of activities. And this is from various sectors, but it goes to show that in one example, you can have a lot of climate finance that is basically from, channeled from various places, but is not only a donor-recipient kind of relationship that we're talking about, at least for this one country. So I don't know for a lot of other countries. And I see here you are, some of you are representatives of recipient countries and donor countries. So I'd really like your information also about what do you think about this? Like, why is it that developing country contributions are not better acknowledged in the international negotiation processes? Also, at the community level, there's a study by my colleagues, Cecilia Luttrell and Aaron Sills and friends, that on 22 REDD sites in 6 countries, this is part of the GCS REDD study, and they looked at institutions that are involved in the setup of REDD activities. And they found that a lot of the subnational and village level institutions that are involved in implementing and in implementing REDD at the local level, they are sharing the cost burden of REDD, but they don't have any clear benefits coming out of it. At that point, this is the start of the REDD project. So, again, another kind of contribution that's not very well acknowledged. So, in this study, in this chapter, that's my whole point. It's just to raise awareness about this kind of relationship that we should rethink. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Nia. I never thought you could talk about finance without showing numbers, so that's really impressive. Thanks. Makes it really interesting. The next speaker is Mina Setra from Amman, as I said, and please come forward and tell us what you think about REDD+.
Okay, thank you. At first, thank you for accompanying me here, because I thought I will be alone. My name is, hello?
Hi, Mina.
Hello?
Hi, Mina.
Okay, everybody still wake up. At first, my name is Mina Setra. I'm from Dayak Pompang, West Borneo, Indonesia. If you ever come to Indonesia, that is the biggest island in Indonesia. I'm from the west, and I'm of Dayak. Before we start, I want to just introduce shortly about my organization. People said, if you don't know, how can you love? So, how do I? Okay. Okay. So this is Aman, my organization, Indigenous Peoples Alliance of the Archipelago. We are community membership organization. We have 2,373 indigenous communities, member of the organization, and the population is about 19 million individual. Those are our members everywhere. Actually, if you visit Aman Webs, you can click and there will be information, general information about the community. Where should I? Oh, okay. Oh. All right. We work through 21 regional chapters in 21 provinces. We had 117 local chapters, 3 wings organization, which is indigenous women, youth, and lawyers. And then we have 3 autonomous bodies and 2 economic institutions. Okay, questions. What we feel about REDD after 10 years? I think in our experience in Aman, REDD is stuck into technicalities. There are so many commitments on REDD now. Well, I can say that REDD has contributed quite a lot for indigenous peoples. In the past 10 years, we are more visible internationally, nationally, regionally, because when people talk about forest, you cannot escape talking about indigenous peoples who's been protecting and own the forest for centuries. Forest issues become stronger everywhere, commitments everywhere, but challenges is also higher. So I want to show you why technicalities become an issue. Examples from Indonesia. Sorry. So, in Indonesia, together with many of our partners, we already map indigenous territories, 9.6 million something. I'm not good with numbers because my English. 9.6 million from 777 indigenous communities. We already mapped this. So we come to Ministry of Forest and Environment because in Indonesia we have a potential, we have opportunities to get the recognition for the customary forest. And then government said, okay, we can recognize, but at least the area that you submitted to us have to be clean and clear. Okay, what is that? Okay, they explain. Clean means there's no concession. It's not overlapped with any concession there. And clear means that at least this area already have local regulation or local government's decree, like Bupati's decree or governor's decree. So we were like, oh my God, we are doomed. This is difficult. We were like, maybe we don't have any hectares that is recognized or not overlap. But okay, we try. So we try to check from the 9.6 million. We found actually 5.7 million hectares of the customary forest from 520 indigenous territories. Actually clean, no overlap with any concession. Okay, that is our first modalities, right? Now, this is what we found. So, from the 9.6, without concession permit is 5.9, sorry, I was wrong the other side. This was the correct one. So 62% from 9.6 actually without concession permit. So not overlap with any concession. 38% is with concession. So our modalities is this one, right? This one is clean. So now we check, okay, how much is actually clear? Clean and clear. So from 5.9, we checked again. Okay, of course, mostly have no regulation. So 68% no regulation at all. But we have 25%, 24% with district regulation, and then with district region ordinance, 8%. That means, so this is actually the data of total areas and also the how many perda or local regulation that recognize the territories. And from this, total is 1.9 million. That is clean and clear. So we submitted to government. We told them, okay, so actually now we have 1.9 million. What are you going to do with it? So far, government, it's very slow. So far, government only recognize 25,000 hectares from 21 communities. Can you imagine the gap is too high? Actually, they can do 1.9 because it's clean and clear. But so far, 25,000 only. You can check. It's already in the news everywhere. You can Google it. Okay. But this not stop us. Okay, we try now. We're still working hard with the ministry on how to accelerate the process. So we told the ministry, okay, actually we want to give an evidence of our contribution. So we told them, okay, we actually already doing the carbon counting from all these forests in the indigenous territories that we already mapped. So this is the result. So we actually already do this. We work together with WRI and Woodhalls Institute. We work together with them. So this is the data. It's too much number for me to say, but you can see. So actually more than 5 billion tons of carbon in indigenous territories that we already mapped. So we submit this to government too, and we were saying that this is the evidence that we are really contributing to your NDC. Yeah. And also we continue again with, okay. Oh, oops. So few months ago, we did a research together with 3 prominent universities in Indonesia. University of Indonesia, IPB, Agriculture University, and Pajajaran University. We conducted a research in 6 indigenous territories on the economic value of indigenous communities in indigenous territories. Because now our president, Pak Jokowi, he wants to work on economy. But mostly things are too much macro. Seeing the economic development in really big things, no? So we want to show him also with numbers. Because he likes numbers. So we want to show him also, okay, let's see. We will put numbers. So this is one of the examples from the Moikalim community in West Papua. So we have, we make the research, the economic value. The result is actually, the economic value from Moikalim community is much higher than local GDP. So actually this is really interesting. This is only one territory. What about if the whole area, the community in that local district level, we counted, it will be more. And this one is not with carbon yet. This is only from ecological services. And this is the result. So we launched this study, and then now many local governments come to us and, can you help us doing this? Because we actually, this is really interesting. In fact, many local government actually didn't realize how much is actually economic value from their own territory. Because too much seeing the macro, the big macroeconomy like oil palm, plantation, pulp and paper, no? It's too much into that kind of. But if you really check on and count everything, actually the potency from the community is really, really high. So we present this to government, and we are hoping that anyhow the technicality will not hamper the goodwill, the commitments that we already have. Because actually, if governments want, they can do accelerate the process. No, not stuck in one word or two words, like in the almost happened in here. So that is what we need to, and also maybe find more creative solution, like what now people try to introduce, maybe indigenous protected areas or protected forests, community-based management system that's already done, but how to elevate those initiative. I think that's it. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. That was great. The previous session earlier this day was about indigenous knowledge, and now we got exactly that, indigenous research. Thank you. Okay, I think we have about 10, 12 minutes. My idea was to have a panel discussion, but maybe we just, because it's also a bit tiresome to listen to others all the time, so maybe just open the floor for questions and comments. And I see already Christoph here and the lady over there. Can we get the microphone? Yeah.
Thanks very much, Christoph, again from Greenpeace. This was very interesting. I actually have a question. I guess it goes mainly to Arild, but probably to the other panelists as well. One can see between the lines that maybe REDD in the past has been overburdened with general development cooperation issues. And so my question would be, what could be done to make sure that REDD at its core goes to forest conservation and restoration in line with forest peoples and not to many other issues in developing countries at an age where industrialized countries actually failing on their ODA commitments? What can be done about that? And secondly, on finance, what can be done to make sure that more finance goes to true game changers for the better and not to a big extent to people who have an interest in maintaining the destructive status quo?
Thank you. Also for keeping the questions short, I would like to ask everybody to really keep your questions short so we can get a bit more of your questions. So next, let's collect 3. So yeah.
Yes, hi, my name is Jenny Barron. I'm from the Swedish Agriculture University and the CGIAR program, Waterland Ecosystems. And I have 2 questions. And one is for the first speaker, sorry, your last name. So this session has been very much about REDD and forests, but most people actually live in mixed landscapes, and we have to do agriculture and forest mitigation efforts. So are there some lessons learned that we can transfer to the agricultural sustainable intensification agenda? And to the last speaker, I would like to ask, are these calculations just helping the taxman by enhancing economic value and therefore putting the taxes up for the people?
Okay, thank you very much. Interesting question. And then I think, yeah, Faisal.
Faisal Parish, Global Environment Centre, Malaysia. Mina, a very interesting presentation that you make and about the significance of indigenous territories in Indonesia. How do you see moving forward? You've said you've had some challenge addressing the issues with the government and getting recognition, but what opportunity is there moving forward? And secondly, from the issue of, we've looked at the 10 years experience with REDD+, so how about the next 10? Where are we going to be in 10 years' time? And can we bridge that link and really make this investment, recognizing what was said in the Clara report highlighted this morning, that getting the resources to the hands of indigenous and local people could be a game-changing transformation to moving forward on addressing emissions. Thank you.
I see a few more. Can we just take those and then we come back in the second round? Is that okay? So, who wants to start responding? The questions about finance.
Okay, is it working? Yeah. Yeah, Nia can take also this finance, but how to kind of keep the finance, the aid finance, which is, I don't know, old figures was 90%. I guess it's still most of the international funding for REDD is from aid projects. I start to say international REDD funding because Nia has a very point. Much of the funding is domestic and not properly accounted. I think the key is to show impact. And we have poor systems for doing that, as I argued. The Norwegian, which is kind of the REDD superpower together with Germany, was criticized in the general audit report for not having system to kind of trace the impact of the funding, and that's been one of the main messages. So show impact, and maybe in a few cases, if you cannot, we should also rethink it. On the second, how to make sure that the funding is really a game changer. The main idea of REDD was highly problematic in the way that increasingly deforestation is driven by commercial actors. If you want to compensate and incentivize those that are the main agents of deforestation, it means using aid money to rich people, and that's unacceptable politically. So we could have used aid to kind of in the aid debate you talk about budget or sectoral support for grand reforms, not at project level. That has not been done, and or only to a very limited extent. And I think it's a challenge, it's a dilemma how to make REDD not just be for very localized or even jurisdictional level or subnational jurisdictional level, but also to make it support political changes. And I don't have a good answer to that, really. The SLU, or Swedish Agriculture University question, on agriculture, there's one chapter in the book that I also been a co-author of. I think the main point is that sustainable intensification may not necessarily reduce the pressure on forests, because intensification often means more profit and an incentive to expand. What the climate smart agriculture and restoration projects, very few put systems in place to track the carbon impacts. And I think that's one, if there's one message, start tracking forest and carbon impacts of both CSA and restoration project. It's surprisingly how little that is done so far.
Okay. So how to get finance to be game changers? Okay, and make sure that the money doesn't go to big interests. Yeah, I think I'm just echoing what I think is the main line of thought amongst the three of us, which is the people. There are imbalance in who is being represented as the big contributors of finance here. I'm asking, the domestic budgets, domestic national budgets of recipient countries, they're not included. And so you think that, okay, they're not a big player, but they are. And also at the community level, like what Mina was saying, there's a lot of contributions. And it had to be done by like small groups of people who are interested in getting the truth out to get this information about the contribution. So I think the first step is to really understand the landscape of climate finance, include the players and all their contributions, and not just a few. Thank you.
Thank you for the questions. I don't have perfect answer, but I'll try to respond. Actually, on the taxman, that is difficult. Well, actually, what we did here with the economic value research is to provide more argumentation for governments. It doesn't mean that we are going to open to make the territories become open access for any businesses or communities want to do businesses just like that. But it's just to provide argumentation to governments that, look, if you protect this territory, actually this is the things that you protect. This is the value that you protect. That is the most important things. But second, that can also give opportunities for government to work together with the community to start, maybe working on developing the local economy with community-based economic development, for example, community-based enterprises, economic enterprises. Why not? That is the next step, because we were in indigenous organization. We keep thinking, okay, after we finish with map, we already have mapping. We continue with local spatial planning, the customary the territorial spatial planning, community based, and then after that, people will start thinking about, okay, what kind of community based economic that we can develop here, based on the spatial planning that we make. Of course, it will be based on the spatial planning of the community before that we inherited from our ancestors, because community does have management of the management system of the territories. I think that's the first why we do this research, actually to give argumentation, so governments may have more, motivation to protect the territory rather than destroy it for oil palm or mining, or because it's also provide more than just economic value, but many different other value like spiritual value, and in long term, will be also continue to the second questions. What is the opportunity to moving forward? I think many countries now, when we talk about forests, there are eagerness to discuss, to protect, but also, it's maybe balanced with the ideas to destroy it. I don't know, but let us think like Moses. Moses was given a dream that 7 years from now that will be a famine. So now we have to told the Egypt people to put your barn with all the food, because everyone will come and seek the food from us in the future. So if I am a government, I will provoke everyone to let's do that. Protect as much as forest as we can, because that is a source of water. Because in 10 years or 20 years from now, maybe we will have a water war already. And maybe people will come to us to ask for water. That is another, just let's be creative on thinking of what argumentation we can put on the table. Let's step out of the box. We are so far we are sitting in the box like this, like there's so many other things out there that we should explore and put the more appealing maybe call for government. Give them new ideas. I think that maybe can help. And also with the adoption of the local communities and indigenous people platform, I think that's also our opportunities, because then we can work together to put the indigenous people's traditional knowledge, traditional technology into more scientifically proven. When we work with government, and we can maybe elevate those, so it can be useful for climate change mitigation and adaptation.
I love that creative Moses principle. Joseph?
That is
whatever, one of those guys. They were very creative. Okay, I promise to have another round. Let's be very quick because we are already very advanced. So I admit 2 more questions and then be very short. That's you and somebody in the back there raising his hand for a long time. And then I ask everybody to wrap their answers into the final short statement. Thanks. So please go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Tasila Banga. I am the national coordinator for a project, landscape project called the Zambia Integrated Forest Landscape in the eastern part of Zambia. And I wish I could give a looking glass for everyone to see the location and see what is going on there, because when I was listening to what we have learned for REDD+, my sentiments are similar about the technicalities that we have been stuck into, and also the inability to be able to see where are we going in terms of implementation. The realities on the ground are very different from anything that you can read, because we are looking at landscapes like my neighbor shared. We are looking into agriculture, emissions reductions from agriculture sector, from energy sector, from forestry, from land use, and all of those, bringing them together with a government system of ministries that have been used to working
Please
in
be short. Okay.
I'm trying to be short, but it's the reality that we face as projects, as initial landscape projects implementing on the ground, because bringing together the MRV system, bringing together efforts that are existing but maybe in smaller form on the landscape, and be able to report at national level through the NGC system is very complicated. And I'm hoping that maybe C4, their next version of the book, will be putting some of these things together so that we have specific tools that projects like us can pick up and be able to kind of follow through without being lost so much in the mess. Communication is another issue. We've had indigenous people here speaking about how can we record those messages. But if the discussions the last 10 years have been technical and at high level, how do we bring it to those people on the ground? Because to me, at the moment, it feels like we are beginning from the scratch all over again.
Thank you. And then the other, way in the back, way in the back. Sorry. Yeah.
Me or some?
It was.
Okay, sorry, I thought it was.
Well, there was someone in the back. Then.
Yeah. Okay. My name is Anggi from Indonesia. Sorry. Can I go first? Just a quick comment, not a question. In my experience, I think REDD+ money should be empowering like non-business as usual coalitions from a broad variety of stakeholders like business, private sector, and civil society, because that's what happened under the first stage of like LOI between Indonesia and Norway, and then it stopped. So I was under the impression that although the money is just a promise, it set things in motion. And my second observation is that I think there have to be more researchers that go deep into unveiling the Professor Haryadi said pseudo-legal institutions or shadow institution in Indonesia. I think corruption is a leverage. It's an issue that if we address can bring us to the tipping point. It's just like 2 quick observations. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, finally. Sorry, I have to close.
My name is Madhav Karki. I'm the member from IPBS and also deputy chair from Ayushman Commission.
Can you?
It seems to me that although REDD+ has a lot of potential, I firmly believe that if we are successful in harnessing all the potential REDD+ has, we can keep the world maybe 2 degrees, if not 1.5 degrees below. But it seems to me, hearing all that, really is all about mitigation and forest. I didn't hear REDD+, a story about adaptation, a story about biodiversity, a story about poverty reduction. So going forward, I would suggest, and I wanted the panel to react, if you don't make it a story of mitigation, the story of forest restoration, but also the story of poverty reduction, biodiversity, and adaptation. I think REDD+ will remain just discuss about dollars, and which would be a very narrow focus. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very, very good comment. Point well taken. Okay, I ask the panelists to really sort of wrap it up, answer all these questions, and do it in 2 sentences each.
I use a lot of commas then, not on full stops. I don't think I will address I think all the last 3 were very good interventions, and I'm only are not kind of oracles to answer that comma. Then I think the agreement here is REDD needs to move into politics and kind of to be transformational change. We have done a lot. We have to do the hard choices. And I think we have to address the climate deniers. No, not Trump, the Bolsonaros, no. The climate deniers are those kind of second-degree climate deniers. It's those who say climate change is seriously, but fail to kind of draw the implications, that believe in business as usual will take us to 2 degrees, that don't see the need for the radical reforms. And that goes for my country, Norway, when we discuss oil production. It goes for Brazil when they discuss deforestation, or Indonesia, whatever countries. All the countries have its climate deniers in the way that they fail to see and being willing to draw the implications, and even among us to draw the implications for our personal lives. So those are the real climate deniers we have to address.
Okay. These comments are very well justified. Bringing together everything in a landscape and trying to monitor and measure are extremely difficult. But I think a lot of many countries are facing that. So, for example, in Ethiopia, there's also this jurisdictional level approach in one of the Oromia regions. They're also facing the same challenges. Maybe it's not C4 specifically, but I think there's a lot of cross-learning that can be done. But yeah, I cannot give you specific answers on that. Comma. Bringing things to the local level, and then addressing shadow institutions. I think it's going way beyond what is only REDD, but in general, good governance. So, every country needs that in a broader sense. I think also the idea of not only focusing on mitigation is difficult, because this is the first time the humans are saying that we are causing some humongous change in our world, and somehow we can stop it. It's a very hard story to believe. By planting trees, you can stop like a climate change? What? However, a lot of countries, a lot of communities are experiencing climate change in their own way. And maybe by focusing on the synergies between adaptation and climate change, then the story becomes a bit easier. You adapt to this hardship. Humans adapt to hardships all the time, so it's nothing new. And you can do it with forests. So maybe that is an alternative way to cast the REDD story, probably in the future, that we need to embrace more. Thank you.
Okay, well, as indigenous person, indigenous groups, working with indigenous organization all over the world, we always have the same call: protect the protectors. Protect the people who protect the forest. That is the first thing we can do. And second, action, action, action. No more theory. Come on, reduce research. There's too much research already. If you do action, check on your table, check on the Google. There's so many research that we already can use, yeah, and then start doing the real action. That is what we have to do.
Thank you. That was good. That was a good closing. The day started with nature talking to you, or the forest talking to you in this little movie. So the planet is saying thank you. Thank you for being here. Thanks.